Welcome, everybody. Friday, Two Chaps, Many Cultures, episode 65. That makes it what? 13 weeks, if my math is right? Whoa, 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 whoa. Today, we'll talk a little bit about language. And should you learn it? Find out now. Welcome, everybody. Happy Friday. So today's topic on Two Chaps, Many Cultures is, should I learn the language as I go abroad? And I brought with me today an expert on this because he came from abroad and he took it upon himself to learn the language of his host country. Welcome, Brett Parry.
I did. It's a very difficult language to master, I must say. I'm constantly misunderstood. I can't speak it properly, but I'm trying. What can I say? Forget about it. You know, does that help?
Well, the thing with trying is it gives you a way out, right? So if you remember Star Wars and if you remember Yoda, he would tell you, try, there is not, there is only do or do not. All right. So in any case, today we'll talk about how important is it to learn the language of the environment in which you spend most of your time. So
That's a good way to put it.
You could go abroad. It could also be that you work in an organization where the operative language is not your native tongue. And how important is it for you to master it, or at least do the best you can to learn it? Of course, I was being a little bit silly about Brett. However, Brett chose to spend the rest of his life with a partner who doesn't speak his native language. Did he take it upon himself to learn it? Come on, Brett.
Tak, oczywiście, tak. Ja mówię po polsku.
See?
So yes, my environment, you will say that my environment is predominantly Polish, having a wife that speaks Polish natively and many other languages, but also a daughter that we have raised to speak the language too. So in order for me to learn and be humbled by my daughter's expertise and native fluency in that language, I expose myself to her often humorous responses to the way I speak the language, but I do it. And I try them in most cases to do it. So in my environment, yes, I have the opportunity, I think, the opportunity and the grace to be able to now speak or understand at least quite well another language, which I never thought I'd be doing, which is interesting.
And here's why this is an interesting conversation for us to have, because the whole topic, the whole premise of us discussing the relevance of learning another language is a very, let me put it diplomatically, is a very Anglo-centric question. It is a question that in this format or in the way we're posing it would only be presented in an Anglo context.
Right. I think that's true. I think many times we suppose that from an English point of view, that the rest of the world only speaks English, and we have just that to share. But in many places of the world, speaking multiple languages is just the norm. Right. So other people, to learn another language, it becomes their way of life. It becomes their existence and critical to their existence a lot of the time. So, we do tend to think that English is the main thing, but it is not really.
No. I had a conversation yesterday with a gentleman who speaks 7 languages, not because he wants to brag about it or because it is something that he makes money with because he's a language expert. He is not. He's an engineer, and he does all sorts of things and does a lot of consulting work. And he comes from a part of the world where it is not even questioned that you speak at least 2 languages, because otherwise you won't be able to function. So I'm not going to give away the identity of this individual. We may actually have him on this program sometime soon. You'll never know. But let's look at South Asia, for example. Let's look at Sub-Saharan Africa. You may be living in a national construct, which is your country that issues you passport. That doesn't mean that everybody in that country speaks the same language. And without being able to speak your neighboring region's language, then life in or work in that country may be quite challenging. So it is kind of a given to be bilingual, multilingual in many regions of the world. And the question whether should I learn the other language is, well, I'm going to be less diplomatic now, is a question that comes from a position of privilege. The privilege of being born or being raised with the current lingua franca in the world, which happens to be English. It wasn't always like that, my dear friends. There was a time when French was that language, and long before that, Mongolian was that language, and Latin was that language, and a earlier iteration of Chinese Mandarin was that language, or whatever, wherever in the world you go, there were different languages that took precedent, or that superimposed themselves on the territories which they governed somehow. So right now, in our lifetime, English happens to be that language. Just because you're born with it or raised with it doesn't mean that knowing another language wouldn't benefit you. How did it benefit you, Brett? How did it change the way you look at things?
Well, I guess it changed the way that I viewed the expectation of or the ability to learn another language. Of course, I thought I would never need to, so why should I try? And apart from a little bit of French at school, but and I never thought it'd be Polish, one of the most difficult languages on the face of the planet to try and learn. But I think it's proved to me that the brain is malleable. It can be done, and of course, I'm biased when I'm working with clients, and I say, look, just for your personal achievement, I think learning a language or really attempting to understand the context of language that you're going into is a really great skill to have. Now, the logistics of it, of course, always come into play. If you're a professional going to a country for a very short period of time, and I mean short period of time as in 2 to 3 years, are you going to get to a level of proficiency where it is going to have an impact on you being able to do business effectively in that language? You know, I say I can speak a good amount of Polish, but would I attempt to do business in Polish? I probably wouldn't. That's the difference. But of course, some people, if you go to a country that are going for a longer period of time, where they're really, and especially if they're in a position of leadership, sometimes your credibility might be enhanced in some ways by showing that you are taking on the skill set of being able to do business in the native language. And so it establishes your credibility. But of course, for a shorter period of time, to put that extra pressure on top of actually having to engage with the new culture and to do the business there, that might be more of an argument against it. But I would still at least try and do it socially, you know, have the ability to be able to engage in a restaurant and order food and things like that. So, and especially for children, of course, you know, you and I are parents of children that are multilingual. I love it. I love watching my daughter be able to switch into, you know, from different languages. So, so I think the logistics of it do play a part. Just it's always situational.
I would agree with you, and yet I think there is a sliding scale of possibilities, so to say. The higher the barrier of entry to accessing that other language, the lower the willingness may be. I've had this case just a couple of weeks ago in a training program that I did with a U.S. family that moved to Germany, and before that they spent 3 or 4 years in Taiwan. So it wasn't their first rodeo. They already were familiar with the process of getting used to a different set of normal. And yet they told me that they regrettably did not learn Chinese while they were in Taiwan. They did not, or Cantonese, I guess. They did not take it upon themselves. They memorized a few phrases here and there, and the numbers maybe, and a few road signs. However, they would not be able to hold a conversation in Cantonese. With learning German, they have a totally different attitude about that, because it's the same alphabet. It's also a Germanic language. Sure, it will be a challenge, and yet it appears to them as a smaller challenge compared to learning Cantonese with a different script, with being a tonal language. All of this could be inhibitors or additional obstacles. So I think that the bigger the language gap, so to say, sometimes the lower the energy might be for some to say, well, I'm going to be there for 2 or 3 years. How much am I going to be really able to learn? Is that worth my time? And shouldn't I focus my energy and brain power on something else? So that is an argument that you can make. I'm not saying you should make. However, that would explain why some people are a little bit reluctant to embrace the language learning.
Yeah, and of course, as we mentioned before, other parts of the world are so used to being able to speak multiple languages, and often English is one of them. So you may be very intentional in wanting to learn the local language, but your host, just by their very grace, are going to maybe make it hard for you, because they're just going to say, look, let's speak English, let's make it comfortable for you. Yeah. So you may have to really be so intentional and be making the argument and pushing against their generosity in already being able to speak English. So that's a challenge too.
I've had this conversation many years ago with a dear friend. She is Hawaiian. So she is by passport a U.S. citizen. However, her cultural background is not mainstream mainland U.S. It's Hawaiian Islander. So there is some native influences in her upbringing, and she taught English in Thailand for several years. So she moved to Thailand, and here's a fun fact. So this lady, just from her physical appearance, if you would run into her on the street in Bangkok, you probably wouldn't turn your head, because you would think that's one of the many people who live here. So her outward appearance, you could easily mistake her for being Thai, which she's not. And so she taught English as a second language in Thailand, and quickly learned how difficult the assumptions could become in that interaction, because people look at her and think, oh, you speak Thai as well, and they would just start a conversation in Thai. And obviously that didn't go very far, and she obviously took it upon herself to learn as much Thai as possible during the time she was there. And Thai is also a quite tonal language, and she made many mistakes in trying or attempting to speak it properly. And what she reflected to me was, and I never really thought about it this way until that conversation, because most people think, well, the basics you want to learn in another language is yes and no and please and thank you, and maybe numbers 1 through 10, so you can at least get the basics. And she said, yeah, that's all nice. I think the most important phrase that you want to learn in any other language is how to say, I'm sorry. And I thought about that for a second, and I think she's onto something, because as foreigners in foreign lands, we will make mistakes. We will literally step on people's toes. We will hurt people's feelings, or we will create confusion. And the ability to say, I'm sorry, might deflate a lot of that negative energy that we create with our incompetence in the beginning. So ponder over that, and How do you say I'm sorry in Polish?
Przepraszam.
Przepraszam. Okay.
Yeah.
In German, it is es tut mir leid.
Yeah.
There we go.
Przepraszam is it's actually not just sorry. It's sorry, but it's used in a couple of different settings. So so the context of that is often a bit different. But yeah, and then getting to the logistics, I think how do you learn a language? Mine was kind of organic, my opportunity to do so, and I think that in many cases we're asked.
His wife and him, they spent time in a room without witnesses, and that's where he learned a lot.
Yeah, and then of course you've got what do you? There's oftentimes our clients have said, well, we're starting our training and we're doing one-on-one and that kind of thing. And what I've learned a lot from the English teachers, the people that understand how best we learn languages, is that they've said that oftentimes sorry, someone's just restricting me. Oftentimes the
video, man.
doing the learning is really more organic and better in a group setting, right? Really just embedding yourself in the culture and learning it with groups, a group of people that are not necessarily on the same they're on the same journey as you as learning the language, right? So they're just in terms of setting yourself up for success in terms of learning from the mistakes of others and also experiencing and sharing your mistakes as well. That's how I found, again, you get back to you're talking about the confidence. I mean, you've got to be humble. You've got to be able to make mistakes. You've got to be willing to make mistakes. And use that term, sorry, whatever it is, and that is going to open it up quite well. So I think that's a good idea.
The immersion is obviously a good thing to do once you're there, and not often is there logistically the ability to immerse yourself in the foreign language as you prepare yourself for going there. So what does Patricia say here? I lived in Hawaii and it was appreciated that I pronounce words as the locals do. Hawaii and not Hawaii. Of course. That's why I said it. Of course, Patricia.
Hawaii.
Aloha to Patricia.
Yeah.
May you have all the ohana in your world today that you can have. So the immersing can happen in a lab setting if you work with the right people. And I think this might be a good segue to bring in a guest which isn't there today. However, we talked about this. I want to bring on a guest in one of our future episodes who does exactly that. They provide language learning in a one-on-one and an immersive setting that gets people functional very quickly. And I think choosing the right partner to do this with, if you're serious about foreign language acquisition, then sure, you can go the Rosetta Stone route. You can go the Duolingo route. You can do whatever app you want to use and be all geeky about it. I'm not a linguist. I'm not a language teacher. In my personal experience, I will tell you, this is nice. It'll get you this far. If you want to get to a finish line, work with a human being or with human beings, plural. Right, and if you choose the right partners to do that, you'll see how quickly it is possible to learn something. So, Brett, you said, would you be able to conduct business in Polish in Poland? And you kind of negated that. I would argue, not knowing your Polish skills, I would argue if you were forced to do it, if English was not your fallback option, if you had to do it, otherwise you would not succeed or would go hungry, so to say.
Sure.
How quickly do you think you'd be able to master it?
Oh, no, I think that, what I would need is just the linguistics of the business culture. And that's just adding words. That's just adding the extra words. So that certainly is something I think I could do very quickly. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So,
and I think if there is, the human mind can do amazing things. And whenever we tell ourselves that we failed or we're unable to do certain things, then often it is because we didn't push ourselves hard enough. I'm not saying we can accomplish anything and we can fly, right? I'm not saying we will be doing things that are without our physical reach. However, we have a brain that is bigger than any other known being on this planet, and we can compute stuff that we may not even be aware of. I think language learning is one of those things that you can do it if you're serious about it. If you're going to give yourself a cop out and say, "Oh, well, everybody spoke English," or "I was so hard," and you have no idea, and of course, I don't have any idea what's going on in your mind and in your life. However, the question that I would ask is, how hard did you really try, and how important was it really to you? So, not a question I'm asking you, not a question you should ask yourself while you look yourself in the mirror. You can.
Right. You can do it. You can do it. Absolutely. Yes, try.
What
That'd
language
be fantastic.
speaking predominantly this weekend, Brett?
Oh, this weekend? Well, I don't know, probably English because, my family are not here at the moment. So, I'm going to stick to my English. But that'll be what I'll be doing this weekend. But yeah.
I learned that in addition to the several French-speaking neighbors that I already have, they will add another one. So there's another Belgian moving to my neighborhood.
Okay.
They still don't speak French. That's going to be an interesting experience. I better learn some.
Go at it. I've learned oftentimes the more drinks you have, the better you get at it. That's and I sound better when I've maybe had a few beers.
That's what you think.
I sound better to me. Yeah, that's right. That's what I think. All right, guys. Well, thank you very much again. Another week, 65 episodes. What about it? Hey, fantastic. Love it. Gotta love it.
And I wanna honor something here. And Brett and I didn't talk about this, so I'm gonna throw this at him. This man's been out there volunteering all week. He's not in his Two Chaps tower. This man right now is driving a van for the Chicago Kidney Foundation. So this man's been out and about all week, and he still shows up. Can you believe it? I honor that. You're an amazing mate. You're an amazing chap. Thank you for that.
No worries. Well, you have a wonderful weekend, everybody. Enjoy, and don't be strangers. Send us your messages, send us your comments and questions, and thank you so much, everybody, for joining and listening, and we will see you, no doubt, next week. Yeah.
Happy weekend.
Bye.